I don't know what to say. Thank you.
Come on. That did not feel good. Smashing your fingers between stuff does not feel good at all. There we go. Now we're in business. Getting the, this has a, I didn't notice this before actually, believe it or not, but this has a double Kardain U-joint up here by the transfer case. And for those of you that don't know, a double Kardain U-joint is something that has two U-joints very close together. Some guys hate them. Some guys don't mind them, because it does and can make it extremely difficult to fix or to replace worn out U-joints. Let me show you real quick what it is. So double Kardain, you have one U-joint right here, another one right here, and I always have a flange on the one end of it. Usually, you have a flange on one end of it. The good ones have a flange anyway. But this is a double Kardain U-joint setup. One U-joint here to the front shaft, one U-joint here that bolts up to the transfer case. This allows for extra flexing angle. So in off-road vehicles, excessively lifted vehicles, having a double Kardain U-joint setup is a real good time saver, because it'll save your rear and pinion on your rear end. It can also save your output gears and stuff like that inside your transfer case. My sister actually has a 91 Wrangler that she herself installed a double Kardain U-joint into a long time ago, because she kept blowing up because the drive shaft angle was too much. Now what happens is when you drive, I'm sorry folks, let me get this out real quick. All right, come on out of there. You are not that much of a pain, I already know that. There we go. Now, what happens when you drive is you have your rear and pinion gears. It doesn't matter if it's four-wheel drive or two-wheel drive, front-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive. You have a rear and pinion gear in every type of setup. Longitudinally mounted like this, transverse mounted, which is the most commonly found in your front-wheel drive sedans, family cars, minivans, stuff like that. What happens is when you drive, now right here, this is my pinion yoke. My pinion gear is right here. The ring gear is inside of the transfer case. So my ring gear is up here, and that's what goes to the axle shafts that go to the outside, which go to the tires. And this is the same on rear-wheel drive and front-wheel drive vehicle, or rear-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles, especially if they have a solid front axle. But nevertheless, it's the same on all four-wheel drive vehicles, primarily like trucks, bigger SUVs, anything built on a truck frame. will have something that looks similar to this, except for most modern trucks, excluding Dodge. And they're 3/4 tons and higher, not 100% sure on their half tons, but they're 3/4 tons and higher, still use solid front axles, which is a big benefit. A lot of truck guys like me love that stuff. So anyway, when you're driving, what happens is this here spins. Your drive shaft spins. Spins the yoke, pinion gear, spins your ring gear, sends it out to the tires, and that's how you get moving. But what happens is when this turns, this here will actually pivot up. And so you'll see your leaf springs flexing. Now on a system like this, you actually want to make sure that your angles are as close to zero as possible when you're driving, because that's less wear and tear on your pinion gear, which means less wear and tear on your ring gear. And those are not exactly cheap fixes. If you're like me, you try to bulletproof anything as much as you humanly possibly can to make it so you don't have to replace it later on down the road. Because who wants to do this stuff, 300 times in a year, figuratively speaking. So that's why having these double Kardain joints is a good idea, is because then it makes it where there's less flex, yes, more parts to wear, which means, it takes the reliability down because there's more wear parts. But if you get your drive shaft made good enough and you have the angles set up to where they need to be, you can eliminate the necessity of having a double Kardain U-joint. So when this flexes up, you hope that this is straight in line with your drive shaft, so it's all in one line. To make it less wear and tear on your U-joint here, less wear and tear on your pinion gear, on your pinion shaft right here. But that's just a little quick lesson for the folks that don't know how that stuff works. There it is. Gotta find this last bolt right here, and then I can get this front drive shaft out. Yay! That's weird. I got my dogs out here with me right now, and I don't know where they're at. I can see one of them. Come here. Where's the other? Where's Mama? There's Mama. There's Mama. What you doing, girl? Huh? What you doing? What you doing, baby? Hi, Ice. What are you doing? You peeking around the dirt bike, huh? What, you don't want to come over here? Goofy dogs. Yeah, I love my dogs. Most days more than people, to be honest with you. Oh, that's awesome. Well, this one here is just about to come out right now, actually. There we go. Once I got this truck, I got it home and took a quick little peek around it. I looked at this thing going, how did this thing even go down the road? The kid had wiring so jacked up, or is still so jacked up. Electric fan put in it that, quite frankly, I could have sworn an untrained monkey did. It's just horrible wiring. Body's not put together the greatest. I mean, half these clamps holding down this, down the tranny cooler lines are wrong. Tranny pan gasket's bad. There was bathtub caulking on the intake manifold. I honestly have no idea how this truck ran. I don't know the condition of the engine yet. I just replaced the intake manifold gaskets. To be honest with you, I actually, right before I started this, just torqued down the intake. So that'd be interesting to see what happens with that one. But I gotta wait for my carb rebuild kit to come in that I ordered for it, so I can rebuild the carburetor. And there will be a video on that as well. Oh, there we go. There we are. And she's out. And like I said, folks, double Kardain U-joint. You can see how this thing bends and flexes. It does get a little choppy in spots, but that's most likely because these U-joints are not greased and worn out. So they will definitely be getting rebuilt, but I'm actually gonna be getting new drive shafts for this thing because everything's gonna be changing. The front drive shaft length, rear drive shaft length, plus I have to get a drive shaft to go between the transmission and the transfer case, because like I said earlier, I'm doing a divorce transfer case. Now I know that seems kind of counterproductive to what I was talking about, trying to make the thing as bulletproof as possible. However, there's a reason for it. I don't want to be pulling a transfer case every time I have to do a clutch on the truck, because this truck is going to get used and abused and beat to hell. So the clutch is going to wear out. No getting around that. And it's gonna see mud, it's gonna see dirt, most likely rocks, knowing me, it'll see whatever I feel like throwing at it, which could be everything under the sun. So I'm doing a divorce transfer case, so I can, instead of pulling the T case out and then pulling the transmission out, just to make things easier, I'm gonna put a drive shaft in between the two. I'd be roughly about, guesstimating about that long or so, with a slip joint in the middle of it, because it's not going to need anything special. So I can just pull that drive shaft out, and then I can pull the transmission out to make transfer case replacements a lot faster, or to make clutch replacements, my apologies, just to make them a lot easier. And then I'm swapping out this front yoke, that rear yoke, plus all the yokes on the transfer case for 1410 yokes. So what that is these here are 1310s, a little bit smaller. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with them. They're plenty good. But I want 1410s, and 1410 is a little bit bigger of a cap here. So the U-joint itself is a lot beefier. And that's what I want, is a nice, big, meaty, beefy U-joint. So if I'm going somewhere and all of a sudden one of the wheels gets stuck and locked up or whatever, it's not gonna shear this off. It's not gonna break the U-joint at all. Now I'm not too, it's been a while since I've done anything with U-joints, but a lot of U-joint numbers have to do with the size of them from here to here, which is the same all the way around, and the cap size. So when somebody says 1310 U-joint, that refers to the size of the U-joint it is, how big it is, and everything else. And I do not remember, I wish I did, but I do not remember how to measure U-joints from factory. I used to, but I don't remember anymore. But yeah, so there you go, folks. There's front one out, and she was roadworthy. And I drove 4 hours for this truck one way, so I knew I wasn't gonna go home without it anyways. Plus, it's my favorite body style, and I've wanted one ever since I was a little kid, so it wasn't really a question of, am I gonna buy this? It was more of a question of, yeah, I'm definitely buying this. And I just noticed a new concern that I need to fix before this is roadworthy as well. This right here, there it is. Rear brake line, completely cut off. As you can see, right back there. So definitely need to adjust the rear brakes. Whoa, that's all right though. So I've had a wrench in my hand since I was about 6 years old. First thing I ever worked on was this same body style. It was a '87 Chevy Suburban. It was a family truck, and we called it George. I'm obviously a lot older now, and even to this day, whenever we reference that truck around my house, around my folks or something like that, we say, "I'm Ms. George." We all know what we were talking about. And it doesn't matter who you say that to in my family. You say George, everybody knows. My sisters, my folks, we all know exactly what you're talking about. But anyway, first thing I ever did to that thing was it was a 2-wheel drive, 350 small block with a 350 transmission bolted behind it. And I remember, I was about 6 years old. I was out, being a kid, playing in the mud. My dad asked me, "Oh, you want to help me with the brakes?" And he was doing the front brakes. And, naturally, being a little boy, getting dirty. Sure, sounds like fun. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't used to grease and never messed with it before, so I was a little skeptical at first. Like, I don't know anything about grease. But I dug my hands into it, and he showed me how to pack bearings, using your hand and just beating it into your hand. Ever since then, that's the way I've done bearings. Whenever I gotta pack them, that's how I do it. I don't care about your fancy bearing packers or nothing like that. I do it that way. And I know it might not be the best way. Yeah, if you're not used to it, it hurts your hand. But it's kind of a nostalgic thing for me. It's the way my dad taught me. It's the way I've done it ever since, and I enjoy it. You don't always need fancy tools to get stuff done. Sometimes just some ingenuity and a little bit of brain process. You can figure it out pretty quick. But I've been messing with engines and cars, my whole life, ever since I was a little kid. Well, I remember when I was 8 years old, my dad bought a motorcycle in a box. It was a 1980 Honda CB750K. It's a real fun motorcycle. It was really cool. And I was 8 years old. He bought the bike, and half the engine was inside of a box. Most of the fenders and wiring and stuff like that was inside the box. The motorcycle had been sitting for years. Never even been touched. And so it's kind of like, all right, well, it'll be a fun little project. So yeah, my mom agreed to let her buy the motorcycle, and well, over the course of some time, me, my dad, my sister, sorry guys, stay out of my way, dog. Sat there and rebuilt the bike. Took us, oh crap, I don't even remember how much time it took us to rebuild that motorcycle, but he had that bike from the time I was 8, probably till the time I was, 24. He had the bike for that long. It was a kind of a pride thing for him, because he could sit there and say that, me and my son, me and my daughter, we built this motorcycle. It runs because of us. It was a pride thing for my dad, and he's always been a prideful man. It's one thing I've always admired about him. He's always been proud of what he could do. Well, when I was 17 years old, right before I joined the service, engine went out on it. I sat there, tore that engine apart. When I was overseas, one thing he kept telling me is, "Hey boy, when are you gonna come home to put my bike back together again? I need to go for a ride. And my dad, the people that don't know him, that was my dad's way of saying, I miss you, son. Man, that's the truth. That was his way of saying, I miss you. So the whole time I was overseas and in the military and stuff like that, you know, every time I talked to my dad, it was, hey, when are you gonna come get my bike running? Need my bike. Well, I hadn't been home in some time. Hold on a sec. I hadn't been home in about, 4 years. Well, I was gone for 4 years, but I hadn't been home in a while. And my mom would call me up every so often, and she'd sit there and tell me that my sister would tell him that she'd put the engine back together again, and every time she tried to touch that motorcycle, every time she tried rebuilding that engine, he would get mad at her for even touching it. He didn't want nobody touching that motorcycle engine but me, because I was the one that tore it apart. He wanted to make sure I was the one that put that thing back together again. And that's how it went on for 4 years. I talked to him. He'd tell me to come home, put that bike back together. My dad was a Marine, so he wasn't much for, he was kind of he wasn't much for words. When I got home from the military, my dad looked at me square in the eyes, and then he ain't never really done that before. He looked me square in the eyes, gave me a hug, and says, let's get my bike back running again. And I knew what he was saying with just the way he said it. Couple of months went by, and I went down to his work with him one day, because that's where the engine was sitting. Went down to his work, and I built that engine again. Got her going for him. It was January. We live in Minnesota, in the country. At the time, anyway. It was pretty cold. My dad was so happy. Me and him took turns riding that thing around on the snow, through ice, having the time of our lives. In my whole life, I never thought I'd ever see my old man cry. But the day that bike fired up again, he gave me the biggest hug. Well, that was easy. He gave me the biggest hug he ever gave me, and had a tear in his eye. That was kind of our father-son project, was working on that truck, or working on that motorcycle. And I can't tell you, pride I had and see my old man smile when that bike popped off for the first time. And for anybody that is wondering, no, it did not start up right away. And yes, my old man is still alive. Not in the best of health anymore, but he's still alive and he's still kicking. That was one thing that I always looked forward to when my dad was, you know, boy, help me work on this. Son, help me fix this. That was our thing. And Mama, bless her heart, knew. Oh, Matt's in the garage. Matt's out with Dad. Leave them two alone. Because she knew that, you know, that was kind of our time to do what we do. That was our father-son time. Was working on this and working on that. That's what we did. And man, we loved it. So much that's actually what I do today too. But I wouldn't trade none of those experiences I had doing stuff with my dad for anything. There's nothing that can replace that time. Ah. There we go. Oh, that was a little easier than I thought. Gotta get this puppy out of here, and then I gotta figure out how I'm gonna get the transfer case out. That obviously needs to be done. Yep. Unfortunately, one of the reasons why this transmission is coming out of here is I don't like automatics. Fortunately, these days you can't buy stuff with a stick shift anymore. But I want a stick shift. They're more fun to drive. And yes, I have tossed up the idea of putting a line lock on this truck. Even though it is going to be more of a toy, or not so much of a, how should I put it? It's not really going to be built for doing burnouts, but I mean, you can't have fun, you know, what's the point of having a vehicle if you can't have fun with it? But yeah, this transmission is leaking. Almost everything from everywhere. Engine's about doing the same thing. Need to replace the wiring harness in it. And I mean the whole harness front to back. That whole thing is getting replaced on this truck. Gotta do the ball joints. In short, I got a lot of work to do to this puppy. So she will be a continuous